listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell. I'm super pleased to bring along a very special guest, an incredibly intelligent person who is very influential in the community. His name is Willem Wigman. We're going to hear from him about his reasoning, his communications, and the drive behind MOSCA and the Mage OS Distribution that builds on Magento open source platform. Before we jump into this, though, I'd like to make sure that you have taken the opportunity to subscribe to the Swift Otter Inc. channel on YouTube. We are it's a crazy to see how the subscribers are going up, and I'd love to see your subscription as part of that. Again, we're bringing this great content to you, and I don't make anything out of it, but I want to help as many people as absolutely possible through this. So make sure you subscribe there, and of course, we're on all the podcast syndication platforms too. So without further ado, I welcome Willem to this conversation. Welcome, Willem. It's good to have you here.
Hey, Joseph. Great to be here. We've been planning for a long while. Finally,
yes.
Finally, our stars aligned.
That's always nice when that happens. That's good. So, Willem, before we jump in and actually talk more about Mage OS and MOSCA and all that stuff, what do you do? Because you're wearing a Hyvä shirt, and I love that shirt, man. It's freaking awesome, by the way. I'd love to hear, I think you're full-time Hyvä, right? I mean, am I incorrect in that?
Yeah. I have been working with Magento a little bit over 10 years now. Started out freelance, then owned an agency. With the launch of Magento 2, I pretty much burned out. And then after recovering from that, I joined Internet, an agency from Germany. Very well known in the community. Worked there for about 3.5 years, I think. Mm-hmm. At the last couple of months that I worked there, or the last year probably, I was fully focused on performance. So solving performance issues, both back-end and front-end, and did a lot of research on improving performance on Luma, and got heavily frustrated, as one does with Luma, and decided not to want to work with Luma ever again. I built a new front end, more or less accidentally. My wife needed a really small shop, and I wanted to build it with Magento, but not using Luma, and also not using a headless approach, because I don't think every website should be an app. So I'm not on the whole PWA hype boat. Worked a lot with React. So
could I stop you there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Could you give me a 30-second reason why you think not every website should be on PWA? I'm really curious to hear this.
So I think it adds an extra layer of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
It adds an extra type of developer that you need, unless you have this unicorn that can take extra technology after technology and do everything, but that's not super common. As a developer, you like to focus on a certain set of tools to become really good at it. I've worked with React for over a year full-time, building a React checkout and some apps that were integrated in the Luma frontend, so as standalone components, so to say. So I know what complexity that technology brings. I've also seen at a number of agencies how hard it is to make the switch to single-page applications. We call it PWAs, but that term is being used falsely, because a PWA has nothing to do with whether it's headless or not, or whether it's built with JavaScript only. So single page applications is the better term to use there. And I don't enjoy building websites in that way. So that's a personal thing. I think it's more complicated than it needs to be. I don't think a website needs to be rendered with JavaScript. A browser can render a page just plain HTML and CSS, and it's much faster. And a browser can do a lot of things that we're currently doing with JavaScript. And we finally arrived at the place where we don't need 100 jQuery libraries to do form validation.
Yes.
And instead, now we're downloading megabytes of JavaScript to render a whole page, to render a form, and then render validation. I have been part of the Flash generation, ActionScript 3. I would build every website with Flash only, which is very much like what's going on currently. Like you would download a Flash app, it would communicate with a backend, so fully headless. I was doing headless 12 years ago with Flash.
Nice.
Loading in XML files and just whole CMS systems built with PHP, and then Flash would render the page. We decided that was not the best way to build websites. Steve Jobs helped us there. And then browsers got a lot better. We got HTML5 and a lot of new browser capabilities, which removed the need for all this JavaScript or ActionScript. And now we've come full circle and we're building apps again. And again, your browser goes to a page, needs to load megabytes of scripts, and then is able to render a page. There are exceptions where this makes sense if you have a really big user experience with, I don't know, if you're building an application, really something different than the regular e-commerce store. If you have certain interactions or animations or a game-like experience in your e-commerce store, I think not a lot of brands can pull this off, because you're doing something that typically goes against best conversion practices. Like if I want to buy something somewhere, I need to get to the product as soon as possible, see what it costs, how it's shipped, pay, and receive it the next day.
Yes.
I don't want to be in a place where there's bad reception, which still happens much more than what you think as a developer. You're sitting by your computer and you have this crazy fast internet connection, and you don't spend a single thought about those people still running into GPRS or Edge connections.
Yes.
So if you take that into account, it would be better if your page renders with just a few hundred of kilobytes of data. And then, sure, you can enrich that experience and load things on top of it. If you need that video on your page, you can load that on request if someone clicks on a button, for example. But if your store is a single page application that requires 8 megabytes of JavaScript and GraphQL requests and everything, then you're building something for a certain part of the market. And if you really think that your customer wants to install an app to their phone or PC, then there's some advantage. You don't need a single page application for that as a site. But if you think people will install your app to their device, then load times become quicker and it's already stored on the device. So then if you have a slower internet connection, there's some advantages there. But currently with Hyvä, the front end that I built, that's built on top of the standard templating system from Magento, it's a replacement for Luma. It's a modern version of Luma that will not frustrate you. It's fast.
Love that.
It's building a store with Hyvä is typically 30 to 50% faster than with Luma.
Nice.
That's the feedback that I'm getting. And the feedback that I've heard for most PWA solutions is that it takes longer than Luma. And to be honest, building with Luma was already not the cheapest the cheapest thing to do for a merchant. And in the end, let's not forget that it's the merchant who has to spend all the budget. And if they can spend less budget on basic things, they can spend more budget on marketing or photography or extra features.
Yes.
But not adding a checkbox to the checkout or basic theming stuff. Our new tagline, we have a rebranding coming up, and a new tagline is going to be e-commerce made happy, because that's our pure focus. We want to make the developers, the agencies, the project managers, and most of all the merchants happier using Magento.
That's right. I love that. And I think 2 points especially there. Number one, I have a hard time seeing how most people want to install an app to their phone for just any given website. Like most of us, we're in there, we want to get a product, we buy it and we're done. Like, I mean, it's not like continuous engagement. And I literally, I've installed, like for us here in the United States, Home Depot, I think I have that app on my phone. Like there's almost, I probably have 2 or 3 merchant apps across the board, and they're big stores. Amazon and Walmart, I guess, would be the other 2. I think it's just hard to see like how maybe it would be helpful. I don't know. And I'm just curious to see on that one. But the other thing I think the really interesting point is that initial time to first paint. Like you click into this website from Google or whatever for the first time. What is that time to first paint? And I know for sure with Hyvä, it's ridiculously fast and with very little to download, and that's going to win out. And that's why I love the idea of Hyvä, and I'm looking forward to. All honesty, we have not had an opportunity yet to build with it. We're still working. We got a whole bunch of projects in the pipeline, but I'm really looking forward to sinking our teeth into it for the first time.
That would be great. I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Yes, that's good. All right, so you're full time with Hyvä, and I think it's really awesome. And the other thing I love about this is that it's paid. And I know some people are like, oh no, it's paid. We shouldn't pay for this sort of stuff. This should be community endeavor. But no, the paying for it puts you on the payroll, which means that the support for this is going to continue. It's not like someone has this bright idea, invests a whole bunch of time, gets burned out, and the project is over with, which unfortunately happens way more often than I think any of us would care to admit. With you being on the payroll, you're continuing to build it and work on it and all that stuff, which,
just me. We're a team of 4 people now. We're a team of awesome. 4 people. Vinay Kopp joined me as a partner, is now the technical director, picking up more and more technical aspects of the job.
Nice.
And we're growing, and we need to build an ecosystem, and there's a lot more that comes with that than just building this team. And it is much more than it. There's a lot of tools built around it, and this only succeeds because we replace the whole front end. Most extensions that work for Luma need adjustments to work with Hyvä, and we spend an incredible amount of time to help with that, to make modules compatible ourselves, to cooperate with third-party extension vendors, help the agencies and the merchants that are working with Hyvä to make modules compatible. And those modules are all shared within our community. So we have GitHub repos with compatibility modules, and that consists of, a couple of tens of modules right now, and that's growing every day. And as a real contribution, we were helping each other thing going on there. But that was really needed to take this thing off the ground, to lift this, because I've seen with more than one open source initiative, if there's not another drive than getting some personal recognition, other things get in the way. You always have your priorities come and go. People get children, people switch jobs, lose interest. And for this to succeed, you need to be able to ensure the merchants that this has a long time support and, a long life. And we even see SaaS vendors building their solution on Hyvä.
Oh, wow.
There's one quite big one that's planning to build over 5,000 stores over the next 1.5 year in a SaaS solution. So we have also long-term commitment from some of our clients and a lot of agencies that fully switch to Hyvä. So they say every next build that comes is going to be Hyvä. So that allows us to grow and build extra features, build out all the commerce features, but also invest more in the extra tools and making everything better. So
that's totally where we're at. Like, I mean, if we don't have to touch Luma again, we'll be very happy, and I'm really excited about that, having a good viable option. Okay, so here's the funny thing. So I kind of thought we should talk about Mage OS. Based off of our conversations I think let's double down on Hyvä, and let's just, because there's more I'd love to know about this, and you're kind of like especially the encyclopedia when it comes to Hyvä. So, and we'll talk about Mage OS in another conversation, because I think Hyvä is incredibly relevant. It's incredibly important to the community. Let's just keep going with this, and I'll fire off some more questions your way about Hyvä if that works for you.
Yeah, I'm up for both. We can also weave some Mage OS things into this, because there's a correlation there, because Hyvä opened a lot of eyes and sparked a new light into the Magento community. And Magento, as we know it, we call a monolith. For those that are unfamiliar with the term, that means your backend and frontend are combined into one, which has a lot of upsides. There's a lot of good things about having a monolith. It means you don't need to care about two different systems, and things work in harmony. There are some arguments in favor of microservices and a decoupled front end, but that also adds complexity. And a lot of people gave up on the monolith because Luma sucked, basically. There was no long-term vision for the current front end. And quite frankly, Adobe said, well, Luma is going to go away. And we will deprecate that as soon as we feel that there's more gravity going towards PWA. As soon as that became the de facto standard, then we will deprecate Luma. So God knows when that's going to be. But in the meantime, there's zero investment going towards that front end.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And there's only going maintenance and security into the current PHP platform, so the monolith. And I think a lot of people got demotivated by that, because that's not an attractive platform to work with or to contribute to, especially if the contribution mechanism is kind of broken. And then I accidentally built this product that showed how incredibly valuable and mature this platform is that we're currently working with. And I have this feeling I've been struggling with Magento 2 for 5 years now. From the day that it's launched, I even burned out over it. And now finally, I'm at the point where I enjoy both the backend and the front-end experience. And it feels like I have all the right tools in my drawer. They're all sharpened. I know how to use them. And now I can I can do my craft. Now I can finally enjoy my work. Instead of that, we're throwing out the whole drawer and putting new tools in place that are very experimental. I think the pace in which technologies are changing in that JavaScript world and its SPA PWA world, it feels very unstable. And I think I think 80% of the Magento market, it's a number that I made up, but it feels like about 80-90% of the market is not best served by headless solutions. They're very experienced in PHP development, usually more back-end focused than front-end focused. So that's also a pain point in the Magento community, I think. But the tools that we're using are coming from the Laravel ecosystem, which is a different PHP platform. Yes. But they really energize the PHP community.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
There's such a high rate of innovation there and so much excitement which I recognized from the Magento 1 time when everyone is just seeing orange rainbows.
Yeah,
And
I remember that. Yeah,
and I brought over some of the tools that they're using there to Magento in this new front end, you can see it sparks joy, and
oh yeah,
people are excited about contributing and working together and making the best possible front end without throwing away all this knowledge that we already have. Because a lot of agencies invested over 10 years in getting good at Magento and building a skilled team. And what are you going to do with those developers that have a hard time switching from PHP front-end work to JavaScript front-end work? Because that's a lot more complicated. You need a different type of developer for that. So a lot of agencies can't simply switch. And a lot of them don't want to. Some are doing both. Like they say, well, we have a customer that fits PWA better, and we have a customer that fits a classical front end better, and then Hyvä is the better choice. I mean, even Adobe says if you're not doing PWA, you should do Hyvä.
That's a good quote. That's a good quote, Kevin. I've definitely heard that myself. Well, so let me ask you this: like, I think a lot of people would say, "Hey, this is Hyvä's a great choice." Like, Adobe says this and all that, and obviously you might get a little pushback because it's not a $35 theme; it's what, $1,000 roughly speaking. So people might say, "Oh, it's really expensive," but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, you're saving way more than $1,000, like way, way, way more, as opposed to using Luma or some of these other really crappy themes that are out there. But in what cases would you say Hyvä would be a bad choice? Like it doesn't make sense, or like the pain point of using Hyvä. Could I ask you that type of a question?
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, every merchant should think twice if Magento is the platform for them. That's the first choice that you need to make.
I got to throw in something real quick there. Yeah. There was a very large fitness brand that I follow. I enjoy. I covet after their products. They recently launched on Magento 2. I shouldn't say the name. I think. I mean, I don't know. There's probably no harm in saying the name, but they launched on Magento 2 here a few months ago. They're on Magento 1. They were literally on Magento 2 for probably less than 6 months, and they're on to Shopify. Less than 6 months.
Did they go to Luma? To a Luma-based front end?
I don't know what they were on as far as Magento 2. I did not look at that. I wouldn't know why they wouldn't be on Luma. I mean, it certainly wasn't PWA, and I'd be very surprised if it was Hyvä at that point.
I think a lot of people that switch from Magento 1 to Magento 2 on the Luma front end, they see a large drop in SEO and conversion rate because the loading times are just so incredibly low. It's a downgrade. Magento 1 to Magento 2 is a downgrade.
It absolutely is, 100%.
Yes. And now we're seeing migrations from Magento 1 to Magento 2, and we hear like 40% increased session time, and I don't know the exact numbers, but very good compared to what they already had. And then especially awesome. If it comes from Magento 1 on Hyvä,
yeah. Important point.
yeah. Not on Luma. I've not heard it that often that a migration from Magento 1 to Luma was that successful. Like, you need so much patching and so much attention to fixing performance issues, and those have become more and more difficult to solve. Google has become so strict in the amount of data that you're loading that at some point I spent months on bundling JavaScript files and wrote whole white papers about it. And then after 6 months, we had all green scores. And then after 6 months, a new algorithm came in and it became all orange again.
I get it. Yeah.
So that was just really frustrating. It kept getting worse. Luckily, the core vitals, the new measurements from Google are focusing on different things. Like, it's more about user experience and reactivity of a page instead of just raw numbers.
Right. So why not use Hyvä?
Why not? Okay.
So first thing is Magento the right? Is Magento the right platform? That's a really good question. I totally agree with you. Magento is not the right platform for every merchant.
Yeah, you need a certain budget to work with Magento, and you need to be able to have developers work on your site. if you don't have the budget to have continuous maintenance or development on your store, then maybe you should go for something simpler that is maintenance free, or at least has less maintenance. So that you're probably looking at a SaaS solution. Then if you're choosing for Magento, when would you not choose for Hyvä? So I think first you would make your decision. Do you need a headless solution? Do you need a PWA solution? It could be that you're in, if you're using separate multiple services that you want to, like the composable commerce story.
Right.
So you would have your content coming from one platform and your reviews from another, and you have all this live data put in from your ERP, and you want to bind all that together into some middleware. I don't know. I don't want to go too technical in a podcast like this, because then it becomes harder for example, a merchant to follow. But if you're in that more enterprise world where you have a lot of custom work and services that you need to put together into one place, it might make sense to have a PWA. But then you're talking about very large stores. That's exceptional. I think that's the 1 or 2% of the market.
Okay.
I don't typically think the rest of the market is best served by a PWA. Some can probably afford it. They will have a really nice store, but it will be equally as good as a template-based website, unless you're using Luma. Then it comes back to the choice: should you choose Hyvä in favor of Luma? So if Luma,
that's not a choice there. That's not even worth a conversation there.
Yeah. So
you just do it, man. That's easy at that point.
If budget-wise, if you're not able to spend the budget on making modules compatible, if you currently have a Luma store with a lot of custom work that's all jQuery and Knockout and Require, so you're using those libraries and you wrote a lot of custom work, sometimes you see modules like a store locator or a custom quick order thing that's 1,000 lines of JavaScript. Now to rewrite that to vanilla JavaScript and Alpine.js, so the kind of JavaScript that we use, the good thing is those 1,000 lines usually become 100 lines or less. It's just so much simpler these days to write those kind of functionalities, because, as I said, for validation you can use browser-based validation. You hardly need any JavaScript for that, and a lot of things. Things like Ajax calls and everything, and that becomes a lot easier if you're just using fetch and other browser capabilities. So from refactoring a lot of modules ourselves, we've seen that the amount of code is reduced dramatically. But you need a developer skilled enough to understand the old code and translate it into the new code. So there you still need someone that's proficient in JavaScript to rewrite that to vanilla JavaScript. That's usually, it's about as easy or easier than writing jQuery code. It's definitely easier than writing React or Vue code. But it's an effort. So if as a merchant you're currently looking at this and you're saying, well, I want to migrate from Luma to Hyvä, what's that going to cost me? Then that might be a bigger cost point, because you need to rewrite a lot of code. And you could add jQuery to your Hyvä site, but then usually you also need to require a Knockout because you use that in your old site. And then you're back to what you had before. So you don't get anything nice there. So the upside, I would say, is at least with using Hyvä, you can use everything that comes from the backend. And we use the layout system and we use the blocks mechanism in combination with view models. So basically the only thing that you need to rewrite is the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Okay.
As opposed to a headless solution where you have a graphical endpoint, if you're lucky, And apart from that, you have to do everything yourself. So you need to rewrite every feature. And if you look at the feature matrix of most of the PWA solutions, usually not even all product types are supported yet.
Yeah, and that's for sure. Virtual and several others are not supported. That's good, and I think, I agree, and I think it'd be interesting then to look at like the business case around that. If you have a really complex site and say, okay, how does this match up? But because I'm guessing you can probably and fairly easily make a case for this is going to save some serious download time, which we all know that affects or increases conversion rate. So I find that interesting. What have you run into as far as some of the biggest challenges for people implementing Hyvä? Because again, just to be clear, like I think Hyvä is a wonderful product, but the skeptic and all of us developers like, okay, but what are the problems with it? And I know it's a little hard asking you because you've invested so much into it, and it is a phenomenal product from what I've seen in every single way. But I think it's helpful that the community understands all sides of this perspective. So in our last few minutes here, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that, for example, agencies, like, okay, an agency says, hey, we're switching to this. Okay, then what are the problems they're going to experience in the next 6 months usually?
I think initially, as with any new platform or any new technique, you need to invest some time in getting to know the tools. Typically, I have heard though that most developers pick up within a week. Like they immediately get more or less productive because a lot of things are familiar, and the tools that we're using are quite straightforward. So they're not learning something entirely new. It's just like it's a little bit of a different dialect, so to say. Not everyone immediately loves Tailwind CSS, so that's the framework that we use for the styling. Most of the skeptic people turn around. Some even start to love it after a while. Others just see the upsides and they take the downsides for granted because it just offers a lot of positive effects. But yeah, some just don't like. Some are so used to having a style sheet where you dictate all the styles of your website, and they see it as a separate thing. And if they want to change the font size, or like they want to change the shadow on a couple of elements, they need to go to all of those elements and change the shadow there. That's the concept that we put into. We componentized every element of the website so that you can easily swap it. We were building this UI library, which will consist of a whole lot of menus and footers and different swatches and gallery layouts and newsletter subscription boxes. That's going to be an entirely separate product once it's done. And you'd be able to just, like with Tailwind UI, you can go to tailwindui.com. It's a commercial product from the makers, the creators of Tailwind, and they offer all these different layouts and design elements. Awesome. And we're building that for Magento on Hyvä. That means that if you, every catalog is different. You want to display your products in a different way. You want to have full-sized images that you scroll through, or you have a lot of depth in your menu structure. So if you want to have a mega menu with 3 or 4 layers, we'll have different components for that you just copy and paste into your theme. So that accelerates the speed in which you can develop a store significantly.
Absolutely.
And I've had that in my mind from the moment that I started working. Like once I realized Hyvä was a product, I realized that was the potential. Like that was what I wanted to build. So everything how Hyvä is currently built has that in mind. So in a component, so to say, which is a HTML file, you have your HTML and your CSS and your JavaScript. Which means you're never building up a legacy code or that code, because once you remove an element, everything's gone.
That's right.
So even with the style sheet that we're generating, Tailwind analyzes the code that you've written and the styles that you've used and only puts that in a style sheet. So there's a purging mechanism that throws out all the classes that you're not using. That's why we get production CSS files of 35 kilobytes. That's super, super small, uncompressed. So not everyone will immediately love that. Once they see the reasoning why it's done that way, they adjust and turn around. I think we've had an incredibly low refund rate. Like I can count them on one hand, and I think also less than a handful of developers that really told me, like, I can't get used to this way of working with CSS. I dislike, can't I just replace Tailwind because I love everything else, but I want to replace just Tailwind. And we had a presentation at Reacticon 2 weeks ago from Sean van Zuidam, a developer who replaced Tailwind in Hyvä with his own framework, Figlia, I think it's called. So he showed it took him less than 2 days to replace it and build it, and then start building a project based on that. So he showed it's entirely possible. But then you won't be able to use that UI library that we're building.
Yeah, I know. And that would, I think that's one reason I'm really stoked about it, is because there doesn't, even in talking to you, there doesn't seem to be many downsides that I've observed, that I've heard from the community in talking with you. There just doesn't seem to be many, if any, downsides. And maybe I think some people would probably complain about, I have to pay $1,000 for this, but it's that, in my opinion, that starts going down the road of being penny wise, pound foolish. That's an English saying. I don't know if there's something in Dutch about that, like that same idiom there, because we can focus. Oh, it's $1,000, $1,000. I don't want to spend. No, but we're saving way more time than that. Like, I mean, it's the no-brainer in that way. And so
you're probably spending tens or hundreds of thousands on your store, on your build. And Hyvä allows you to save a lot of that budget and invest it on other things.
Which is perfect.
Customers have told us that they think €1,000 is a steal for what they get back. Like the amount of hours that we spend into solving issues that they have each and every day is invaluable to them. Like
absolutely.
And to take Jesse Reitsma's argument, he said, well, if you've ever tried to solve performance issues for Magento, you know how much budget you burn on just improving the performance of the front end, and for €1,000, you get that out of the box from Hyvä, which saves you hundreds of development hours. So just do the math.
Yes, I totally agree. I 100% agree, and that's why I'm really stoked about it myself, and I am excited about bringing you on to hear the down low on this. Like this has been really good, very beneficial for me. And again, I love seeing how excited the community is about this, that even Adobe is saying positive things about this. I'm just throwing this out. It'd be kind of cool if you ever got approached and they say, hey, let's swap out Luma for Hyvä. That'd be kind of cool, but chances are that's not going to happen. But either way, it's really cool to see the adoption, the value that you guys have brought to the industry, and the life that you guys have infused back in Magento. Because I agree that Luma was on a bit of a death spiral, and for a lot of reasons. And so that I thank you, but also I am glad that this is a profitable. Well, I hope it's profitable. It's a business venture, which you're still doing it, so I assume it's profitable for you. In that you are, it's something the community has latched onto, and it's been a really good thing. So thank you, and congratulations at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels very much like we're driven by the fact that this feels like a Magento renaissance. Yes. Like we reignited something that was dormant. Like people didn't feel like there was no excitement anymore in the community. Yeah. And luckily people found that joy back with us. And for us, it's number one priority to keep Magento around as we currently know it, which is why we're so heavily invested in the MOSCA initiative and the open source task force from the Magento Association. So that's a nice hook for the next time we speak. We can continue on that.
We will, and we got a lot to talk about. We got the MOSCA, and then we also have, I'd love to talk to you about the open source task force. I don't know if we separate those out, but either way, this has been a great conversation, a little differently than I was expecting, but it's timely. It was perfect. It was exactly what we needed to talk about. So thank you for coming on, Willem. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you. And can I do one shameless plug?
Sure, please go ahead.
Everyone who's listening or watching, you should buy this book. It's from a guy called Joseph Maxwell, and it will make you a better developer. So buy it for yourself and your friends. Good friends buy each other this book.
Well, that's an honor, and thank you for making the call out about that. I'm incredibly passionate about that because, again, like the front end, I really think debugging is a skill that needs to be brought up in the community, and that's one thing I'm super passionate about. So
absolutely,
helping each other out in that. So anyways, thank you for coming on, Willem. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks.
It was an absolute pleasure having Willem on here for this conversation. I think we're gonna have to title this like Mage OS ... actually Hyvä, because I don't know. I've wanted to talk about Hyvä, it just never ended up working out thanks to like other quote higher priorities, but this is what we needed, my friends. And if you have not already heard of Hyvä, if you've not looked into it, Hyvä.io. Now it's not HOOVA according to our English spelling of this. It's HYVA.io, HYVA.io. So I know this is a bit of a commercial, but I don't honestly think it's much of a commercial because of the value you get out of this. It's not like, okay, you're going to be just putting this money into it, forever and ever and ever, and you're not going to get any return out of it. Like, the return you get out of this is tremendous. Like, he probably should charge more for it. I shouldn't be saying this, but he probably should. Like, the value you get out of Hyvä is tremendous, and we're excited to be using it for upcoming projects, and I hope you take the opportunity to look into and examine Hyvä, and perhaps it fits your business needs as well. So thank you for listening. If you have a moment, please do write a review of this Smash the Bug podcast on your favorite podcast syndication platform. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you.